Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the audio version of Tales from the Triverse, my ongoing weekly serial. And this is Alliances, Part 3. The Brulian Wastes, 3208, Bright Sun. The 6 Blades swaggered through the staging camp, Halberd at the front and the other 4 members flanking him on either side. Even amidst a gathering of seasoned freedom fighters and rebel units summoned from across the continent, the monster hunters cut a distinctive path. Being battle-hardened from resisting the dominance of the city-states was one thing, taking down Keng To, Sklereshog, and Durgan for a living quite another. "Remind me why we're here?" Eric asked, thumping his staff into the dusty ground to emphasize every other syllable and his evident annoyance. "This place is noisy, and I don't see any monsters." "Because she invited us," Ellenbryn said simply, as if explaining all possible questions. "Ah yes," the wizard said, with a performative sigh. "Your mid-earth fancy. You do know she's not on the market, yes?" "We're here because we were hired," Halberd said. "We're getting paid." Ngark snarled and clacked their teeth. "We usually make a point of only hunting monsters. What's the plan this time? Start ripping off heads of the city guard?" Laughing, Celine clapped the Koth on the back. "Does sound pretty bad when you put it like that. Brother?" "I'm curious about that part too," Halberd said, shrugging, "but I promise you we're not going to do anything we don't want to do." He pointed at each of them in turn. "And we're getting paid either way." "I still think we should have stayed well clear of all this politics," Eric grumbled. "It's a mucky business." They walked through the gathering, past armed units of Ainfa, humans and Koth. Makeshift armories had been set up, where weapons, armour and projectiles were being forged by elementalists. Energy blasts pinged back and forth in a cave, where training was taking place for the less experienced magic wielders. The entire camp was hidden, nestling at the base of a canyon, deep in the wastes and far from Brulia. Halberd had never seen such a gathering in one place. There must have been thousands there, from all corners. It would be quite the sight, though he doubted they'd be able to depose the university and the leaders in Brulia. He'd heard the rumour of mid-earth technology deployed on the battlefield. The few survivors who had made it out of Kunak talked of flying vehicles and mobile, armoured fortresses. Halberd knew his Earth history, and recognised descriptions of helicopters and tanks when he heard them. An impressive assembly, to be sure. Halberd grimaced, glanced up at the strip of blue sky above, the edges of the canyon rippling in the heat. If it went sideways, the rebellion would be done. There'd be no coming back from a defeat on this scale. He wasn't a political animal, had no stake in this particular game, but that'd be a lot of dead people. Still, there'd be work for monster hunters whichever way it went. Zlati sat in the corner of the command tent, legs folded up on her chair, her arms wrapped around them and chin resting on her knees. It wasn't nice having to listen to the shouting, but it would be too awkward to leave. So she sat, hunched into a ball, biting her lip. She thought about telling them all to shut up. "You're a spoiled mid-earther brat." Christian was pacing up and down, waving one arm dramatically. She'd seen him like this before, always before a raid. Lola moved around the war table, face stern. "I think I've earned my place, Christian." "Pah!" He raised both hands in the air. "So you had a few scrapes. We've all got scars. Don't go thinking you're something special." "You're being a dick," Darrella said, arms crossed, standing off to one side. "Can we get back on topic?" Christian let out a frustrated sigh. "This discussion would be a lot easier if we didn't have a fucking Londoner worrying about how she's going to get home after all this is done. You think this is me versus you?" Lola laughed. "This has nothing to do with where I'm from or where I'm going. You want to go backwards, we want to go forwards. That's what this is." Christian slammed his fists on the table, rattling the map markers. "The portals have brought us nothing but death and despair." He swept a hand towards the others, Lycazra looking decidedly unimpressed by the entrance, Yana sitting quietly in a chair by the table. "We have a chance to close them, to end the cycle and free our people. All our people, yours included, Lola. Can you really say that the portals have made your world a better place?" That's not the point. It's what is. We can't just turn the clock back. But we can. He hurried round to Yana, put a hand on her shoulder. You can fix all of it. Cut off their power base. Without Mid-Earth weaponry, without the Joint Council propping him up, Baltine will be done. The city-states will fall one by one. You know the spell. Yana looked down at the floor. I don't know what I can do, Christian. It's all untested. Until I get to the university grounds, it's all theory. He leaned closer. You know the spells, Canomor's spells. You can close the portals, right? She shrugged. Perhaps. Or I can fix them. Open the Palinor Max Earth portal. Complete the original 40 spell. Christian clenched his fists. You say that like this was what Canomor intended. That's not the case, though, is it? He had no intention of creating the Triverse. No, Yana said, quietly. An accident, Christian said, triumphantly, as if he'd been the one to piece together the man's writings. The Triverse should not exist. All of it is a mistake. Lola screamed impatiently at the roof of the tent. It's what we have. Mistake or not, it is what it is. The problem isn't the Triverse or Mid-Earth or Max-Earth or Palinor. It's us. It's all of us and what we do with it. We're the ones that have messed it up. We? People. Point your finger wherever you like. Chancellor Baltine, Prime Minister Maxwell. Everyone that stands up and chooses to follow them. Men like them only have power because people happily do what they're told. Not because they're forced to, but because they enjoy it. It's our decisions and our actions that have led us to this point. Charismatic leaders preying on people's fears, influencing what people think. She waved her hand vaguely in Christian's direction. He flinched as if slapped, and took a step back, his surprise quickly replaced by anger. You'd compare me to the butcher we are trying to defeat. Pausing, Lola shook her head and took a breath. Zlati stayed small and quiet on her chair, at the edge of the tent, an observer rather than a participant. She'd never wanted to be involved in the decisions, though she was happy to help out. That was fine by her. She'd never been much of a thinker. She didn't understand people much, had always found other people confusing and inexplicable. Or perhaps it was Zlati that was the odd one. Her brain put things together in different ways to most people she'd ever met. She did know Lola, though, and had lived alongside her for years, long enough to know that she was kind and thoughtful and not one to throw accusations around idly. I'm just saying, Lola said more quietly, keeping control of her voice, that if all of Baltine's city guard and soldiers and lackeys had just said no to him, he'd have no power. If people hadn't voted for Maxwell, hadn't marched in the streets with Earth First, he'd have no power. Go back through our histories, every war on Mid-Earth, every warlord of Palinor, all the chaos in Max Earth's past. Every dictator, every corrupt leader is only able to do what they do because we allow it. Because we say, okay, and give them permission. We hand them the loaded gun and then hold their arms steady while they point it at our heads. If all of us just said no for once, we'd rob them of their power. Then they'd just be people, the same as the rest of us, and then you wouldn't have needed to lead this movement and get other people to follow you. And we wouldn't have thousands of people out there ready to die for a cause. We could all have lived our simple lives if everyone just said no. A silence hung in the air. The only sound, the soft rustling of the tent in the wind. Zlati bit her lip harder, feeling suddenly tearful. Christian stood with his hands on his hips, turning his head to look at each of them, then back to Lola. That's not how the world works, Lola. I wish it was. I wish I lived in your perfect world and that we could all see things as you do. He pressed a finger into the map on the table. But people will always say yes. They want an explanation, a direction, an excuse, a reason. So they say yes, and they do as they're told. He moved around the table, back towards where Lola stood. There will always be people who say yes, and follow these bastards. He stood before her, a good head and a half taller, and placed his hands on her shoulders, not forcefully, but gently, sympathetically. And that is why it's up to all of us to stand up and answer no, as loudly and as forcefully as we can. That is what I'm doing. That is what all of us are doing. The atrocities carried out in Baltine's name deserve a response. I intend to provide it. Clearing their throat, Lycasra took a step closer to the war table. I suggest we get back on track. The end game is still to be decided. Yana, ultimately that's going to be down to you. The rest of the plan is clear. At the convergence time, we move on the city. Everything is a distraction ploy to enable the infiltration unit to move Yana to the university campus. Darila was playing with a small ball of sand, spiraling the grains in the palm of her hand. If we can get the garrison on side, it could make all the difference. We know you have a point to make to your father, Lycasra said, but don't get distracted yourself. I won't. As long as the others on Mid-Earth get their timings right, we have a chance, Lycasra said, and that'll reduce Mid-Earth's ability to send military aid through the portal. They'll do it right, Lola said. Zlati exhaled, not having realized that she'd been holding her breath. A hand touched her arm, and Jirah leaned over from his seat, from where he'd been quietly watching. Is it always this intense? He asked, his beautiful eyes flashing in the light from the lamps. She was really quite smitten. Oh yes, she said, grinning. It's how we like it. Thanks for listening. There's a new chapter every week, and as you can imagine, next week's is going to be quite a big one. You can leave comments, find out more, and support the book with a subscription over at simonkjones.substack.com.